Hi friends, strangers, internet. My name is EmilyHanhan. I love colorful makeup and colorful language. Welcome back to my channel, or if you are new, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'm happy to be doing a review roundup of a bunch of colorful palettes that, spoiler alert, I love, I enjoy, I have good feelings about. Review roundups are something I do sporadically, where I gather together a handful of products that I have formed thoughts on. Some of these products in these kinds of videos are a little newer to my collection, and I've been able to kind of gather my thoughts pretty quickly, and others are ones that I have had for a while. Some for, I think a bunch of these I've had for about 4 months, and one is quite a bit newer. But I have some thoughts, I have some feelings, and I'm going to go through and tell you all about them. Now, we have a bit of a green palette, purple palette theme happening, but there's one very colorful one that's going to bridge the gap. And we will jump right into it. If you like colorful makeup, if you like bitches with lots of opinions, or you just like cute fat babes in general, I hope you will subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, I do have a Patreon and YouTube membership program, and I so appreciate everyone that supports in that way. And if you feel so encouraged, I would love to have you join either or both of those. Now, as I mentioned, quite a few of these are from the big haul that I did back in November, and a lot of, actually almost all of them are brands that were fairly new to me. Maybe not new in energy, but new in being in my collection. And so I'm excited to finally give you some thoughts on each palette. Most of these are indies in that you're not going to find them in Sephora. They're not mainstream, but the Viseart Violet Entendu palette is the one outlier in that it's, available in a lot more retailers. This is a small 12-pan palette. I don't know if they have like specific names for their different sizes, but I really enjoy this pan size. It's actually, it looks like it's about it's like a smaller than 26 millimeter little square. This palette is magnetic, so you can very easily take out each of these shadows and rearrange the palette. I've used these as singles. This palette has 8 mattes and 4 shimmers, and I find the shimmers to be pretty nice. I have to say, for a brand that I feel like I heard a lot about the mattes for, the shimmers are pretty. I think that they are not going to be as impressive if you are used to indie shimmers, if you are, into the Pat McGraths of the world, or the Oden'S, the JD Glows. Like, they are softer shimmers, but they have impact. I would say they are not super sparkly, and they're pretty much just like a metallic shimmer, they're not duochromes or anything. Although this one that's more pink does have I think of it as like a pink with a little bit of purpley sparkle in there. The mattes, as kind of expected, they don't swatch great, but my experience is that these all apply and blend really beautifully. They have pigment to them, but they can be blended out, and I do think that this is a nice little color story. My biggest complaint with this is I feel like there's a lot of repetition in a way that doesn't need to be there. All these 4 mattes and these 2 mattes feel close. I'm really happy to have those 2 mattes actually, because they really lean more into the purple, which is why I got this palette originally. I knew it's a purple palette, but it's not a purple palette. But I just think that you didn't need 4 of these shades to get the blend. I actually think they could have eliminated 1 or 2 of the shades. I think that I think that this creates a beautiful soft blend from lightest to deepest or deepest to lightest, however you blend. It's a very like seamless blend, but because the formula blends so nicely anyway, I do kind of wish that they had at least taken out one of these two mid-tones and given us more of like a mid-tone true purple, or a lighter purple shimmer that was purple, because you have this pinky shimmer, you have this silver. This is a beautiful rose, kind of rosy violet that goes really beautifully with the mattes. But then the only other like purple shimmer is this deeper one, and I would have loved to seen a brighter purple shimmer or a purple matte that actually stepped between these two, because I feel like with purples, having that third tone is actually very helpful, whereas with these softer tones, I think you can kind of fake it through. So anyway, that's my, like, if I could edit this and change this, those are my thoughts. I think for me, I'm happy I have this. I'm happy I have them as singles. I like that functionality with Viseart as a brand. I think the packaging is quite beautiful, and I got this on sale, so I think it was worth it for me on sale. I definitely think it's worth waiting for a sale. But I would say if you're not interested in the actual softer kind of, I call these the rose quartz tones, and I blame that on Huda Beauty, but I call them the rose quartz tones. If you're not actually interested in those and you're really interested in purple, I don't know if the like other kind of half of the palette will like satiate the purple needs. But I do think the purple mattes that are in here are nice. So yeah, I think it's, you know what? For me and my brain, I think of this as a half neutral, half purple palette. And I think if you think of it that way and you use those kind of like muted tones as neutrals or whatever, I think that this could be worth it. So like I said, I'm happy to have it. It's not perfect, but I don't find most eyeshadow palettes to be perfect. Now, another purple palette that came into my life at the same time as the Viseart one is the Meera Beauty Lust palette. This is one of two that they released in their I think it was the Avarice collection. So this palette has 5 shimmers and 4 mattes, and I think of it as really a pink and purple palette. You have a beautiful, nice deep purple, you have a lighter lavender, you have this bright magenta, and then you have this like plummy deepening tone. And then the shimmers, they really fall more in the pink zone for me. But you also still have like a deeper shimmer that kind of gives you that softer plummy tone. I have really enjoyed this palette, and I think that it is a really beautiful color story. Again, it's more pink and purple than just purple, but I think that there is something really nice about the way they did incorporate those plummy rose quartz kind of tones, because with like self-love, all love, and proud, you can get like I call it more of a romantic look, and even pulling in a little bit of the lavender when you're blending, you can get really punchy looks because you have the deep purple and the bright pink, and I think it runs the gamut nicely. These shimmers are all fairly smooth, except for Mask for Mask, which is that more sparkly kind of shimmer. I would say that some of them are a little less impactful than like the Viseart formula, and others are on par or more impactful. They're definitely a smoother formula except for Mask, which gives you that sparkle and shine. I'm really glad that that was in there, because I think without it, like it can amp up other shimmers. And the mattes perform really lovely. They're very pigmented mattes, so I would say, you know, that's something to consider. You're getting a fair amount of color payoff from each color. And like I said, you have that really pinky pink, and then the plummy tone, and then the two purples. I do wish that the purple, like, again, I think in here, if I was editing this to be more of my favorite, I think I would have gotten rid of Authentic, because it's a less impactful pink shimmer than Mask for Mask, and probably would have, again, given you that mid-tone purple that would have been able to kind of play with all of the other shades. But I think that there's something about this brand that I have a bit of a love affair with. I think the like artwork and the theming behind the packaging with the color story, and the way that, like, this is something Yolanda pointed out with, I have the other palette as well, I'll talk about in a minute, but the packaging color ties, generally speaking, the artwork does generally tie with what's inside. Very cool. I'm rooting for Meera, and I think that this is a pretty palette. Again, not perfect, but that's kind of my thoughts on, like, if you're tempted by it, I do kind of think it's worth it. But that's my bias of loving everything involved. And I do have a code. I have a code Emily if you want to save. I think it's 15% off on Meera. So, you know, just saying. We're going to bridge the gap. We're going to bridge the gap between purple and green with a palette that I have raved about multiple times on my channel already. But I'm giving it its spot in this video so that y'all will hear it and know it and all of that. That is the Blend Bunny Blends palette. I will try to link whatever videos I've already talked about this in. This is a rainbow palette. It really is a rainbow palette. If you have not seen other videos, I got my friends that got damaged, so I don't have the deepest blue, but everything else is pristine. Well, it's not pristine because I've been using it. I think I have used every color in this palette, and a lot of them I've used multiple times. And this is what I'm talking about with the Stair Step purple. That mid-tone purple, that is important. The way it's laid out, the trio of tones, just chef's kiss perfection. Blend Bunny is named appropriately. They blend beautifully. I really love that I have done all pastel looks with like these 8 shades, like the 8 shades in the middle. I did that really, really deep, I called it Love Demon look, where I dug into the 3 deep shades right here. The deepest purple, Bewitched, and Vamp, also beautiful. I have probably used less of like this 9 pan down here because I don't reach for oranges and reds and neutrals as much, but I think that the formula is perfection for me. And what I look for in my matte shadows, they are pigmented but blendable, because you have the stair step kind of, that's what I keep calling it, but because you have these trios, if you go in, whether it's darkest to lightest or lightest to darkest, whatever way you prefer, if you use the 3 shades together, you will have a pigmented and blended blend. And you can also, like I said, you can use like the pastels together or the mid-tone or the deepest together, and they work together. They really do. I think the only, like, I think because I love green and yellow, I almost I want more green and yellow from this palette, because I feel like the yellow tones, they aren't like the, this is me being nitpicky, they aren't like the perfect monochromatic. Like, you know how sometimes tones don't match up quite when you're doing like monochromatic, but I also still love them. In the multiple times I've talked about this palette, I've always said I don't like big palettes. I don't also find myself drawn to all matte palettes, but because it's big, but it's not like huge. Like, this is the Danessa Myricks Lightworks 3. It's thicker, like Blend Bunny is thinner. Let's see. I'm trying to give you some comparisons in case You might have a palette and you're like, oh, this is the Hela palette. So it's bigger, but it's not as big as I was expecting. That's what she said. And I was happy by that. And I grabbed this and I pair it. It's that perfect pairing palette. If you have shimmers you already love, whether they're in other palettes or as singles, it is so fun to pair this with other things. And because the formula is just so good, it's why I keep reaching for it. And like, it doesn't have a mirror, which is not my favorite, but at the same time, because it does bend back and it's just like lightweight, I kind of will put it out as almost like a painter's palette in a lot of ways. So I might be holding another palette and using it, whether it's singles or a pre-made palette, and then I have the Blend Bunny palette on my table, and I'm just like, it reminds me of, it makes me, I got all caught up. It makes me feel like an artiste, and that makes me very happy. So I am excited to see what else this brand does, and I'm excited to see smaller palettes, because they've talked about it. They've talked about bringing out smaller, like, kind of capsule palettes, and that's what I want. That's what I want. Okay. I love this one. No regrets. I would rebuy it in an instant. Now we're getting into the land of the green, which is my favorite place to be. And we have the Greed palette from Meera Beauty. This was the partner palette in this release. This release also has a glitter quad, a pressed glitter quad. This Greed palette does, like, the packaging on this is just so beautiful. And this is what it looks like inside. Again, it's another 9 pan with 5 shimmers and 4 mattes. I have a love of this palette because it has these really bright, almost neon greens, plus a swampy matte, plus a green, blue, brown color. The shimmers in this one I find a little bit more exciting and impactful than the Lust palette. They're not, like, some of them are thinner like the Lust palette, but I find there's a richness to the shimmers that I really enjoy, especially I would say Asian F and Ambition, the deeper ones. They feel a little bit more emollient on the fingers in the pan. 5 to 9 is a really pretty bright green, although it's a little bit thin, so it's not as, like, wham bam as I would like, but it is quite nice. I will say, like, the brighter tones, they probably closely perform to, like, a pigment. They're a thinner texture, so it's like somewhere between, it's not how a true neon shadow performs, which if you know that, you know that those are incredibly finicky, but they remind me of more of a pigment, and so they're a thinner formula. I do think they need a little bit more building in a way, but especially Greed, the center color, it's such a good color. I love it so much. But I think that, like, there is a little bit of just something to consider. DLE blends, like, applies and blends beautifully. I haven't dipped into the turquoise side of the palette as much, but I think that Dream Job, the turquoise in here is, like, it doesn't feel like a full pigment, and it doesn't, so it's a good pigmented shadow is what I'm saying. I really love that this is a green palette, but it, like, has depth and dimension. It's like green and turquoise in a way. I like that both of these palettes, like, they do the kind of monochromatic, or I would say more analogous color stories, and I find it a much more interesting color story to play with than a purely monochromatic color story. And it's green, so I have a love with it. I've said this about both of these palettes. I think they are both perfect partner palettes. Like, I paired this palette with the Pat McGrath Midnight Sun palette. That was such a fun look. I loved putting that look together. Again, I will try to link that video. I actually think that these two will be really beautiful together. I still need to do like a pairing kind of look with this, and I think with this palette it would be awesome. I think that the Meera palettes I think are also some of those that like you could grab a couple of singles or a single and really like add to them. But I would say I do reach for this color story more than the purple, but they fight to both. Like, I love them both. And again, just like I said with this first palette, I have a love for the brand, their story, the art behind it, what they're doing. So yeah, I can't, it's a lovely palette. I really enjoy them. Yeah, I'm like at a loss for words, but I just really enjoy them. And I think for me, that full package moment is important. It is important. It's like sometimes a brand can have completely compelling formulas, but there's not other parts of it that compel me, or they might have really compelling packaging, but the formulas don't. But like Meera grabs both and kind of meets me in the middle in a way. Now, a brand that does in a lot of ways nail all of the above is Oden'S. And so this is the Oden'S Hela palette. I have had this one for the shortest amount of time, but I have these three palettes from the initial Legendary Diversa release, and I have lived and loved. I have lived, laughed, loved with all of these for quite a while, and so I've gotten to know the Oden'S different formulas and things like that. So even though I've only had this for a couple of weeks, I have thoughts. First of all, I have to say, packaging is beautiful as always. I think I actually, so this packaging has a texture to it, and this one is more smooth, but with the raised bits. I think I prefer this smoother feel, but sometimes for me, this sounds weird, but sometimes for me with this packaging, it's the sound of having the three together that neurodivergency. This has a beautiful sleeve, which I don't know where it did. Anyway, the death artwork is maybe more beautiful than the cover. Okay. But it's still very pretty. And then this is the palette inside. So we have the round mirror, and it has the life and the death versions. And this is a 16 pan palette. This has 7 shimmers and 9 mattes. And Oden'S, similar to these palettes, I feel like there are a couple of different shimmer formulas happening in here. We have some that are firmer pressed, like Venom, the brightest green, Hellfire, and double-sided, the multi-chrome. They're kind of tighter pressed and maybe a little finer. Then we have and actually even Golden Bridge is a little bit firmer pressed as well. It's impactful. They are impactful, but if you get hard pan or things like that, I wouldn't be surprised, because you're kind of digging in with your finger and the oils and all of that. You have River, which is not quite as it's not quite as firmly pressed as some of the others. It's a little bit more impactful, how do I say? Here's the thing. I didn't even say it. They're all impactful shimmers. I want to make that clear. But I think River has a little more emollients, but it picks up. And then Complete picks up beautifully with the finger. Fluorescent is more of a flaky shimmer, so it picks up, but then if you pick it up with a brush, sometimes it can kind of like flutter around the eyes, the face area. I really like the variety of formulas, but I can understand how some of the firmer press shimmers they're not perfect. Like, I do wish Venom was a little easier to grab and apply, because it's like one of my favorite colors. But really like the dimension in these shimmers because you have like Hellfire is this like peachy pink. You have Double-Sided, which is a true multi-chrome. It's that kind of like Kaleidos Prophecy, like red, orange, yellowy, green. River, I love that kind of like purpley blue brown. I'm always bad at describing these colors, but I love these colors. And I really love the way fluorescence can look yellow or green depending on what you pair it with. I haven't used Golden Bridge a ton because it's just like a dirty gold to me. I have used Hellfire on the cheeks as well. It's a really beautiful like blush highlight moment. Obviously it's like, it's a little glittery. It's you know, if you're anti-texture on your skin, I wouldn't do that. But this does actually work as a really beautiful face and eye palette because the pink is a beautiful blush. It really applies nicely. It blends. It's pigmented, so you have to like take your time. But those two together, so lovely, so lovely. The soot, the deepest is such a beautiful matte, and I think because it's like plummy, there's something about the color where you could almost use it with the green browns, and you can use it with the pinks, and you can use it with that blackened shimmer. So pretty. I mentioned this in one of my Get Ready With Me's when I use this palette. I do find that these three mattes. Let's talk about the mattes. I started talking about the mattes already, but let's talk about the mattes. I do find that Underworld, Moss, and Wolf are a little bit close. They're a little bit, like, they do look different. They are three different shades. But I think if you are not careful in how you are applying them, you might end up getting kind of one color. If you blend too much, you're kind of gonna probably end up with a color like Moss, which is that middle tone, because Wolf is more of that like golden mustard, and Underworld is this really, actually it reminds me of my top. It's like yellowy green. It has some brightness to it, but it's not a neon. And then Moss is that like bright green, like acid green, but make it swampy. But I think if you're not careful, you might end up kind of getting they might look a little too close if you were to use them all together on the eyes. Rebirth is pretty, but I don't actually end up reaching for that paler yellow as much. I'm not like saying it's a bad color. I haven't used it as much as I expected to. And then we have Decay, which is this deeper, this is like a gray-green brown. Does that make sense? It's a pretty cool color, I have to say. It's not always a color I would use a lot, but it's a cool, like, depth deepening shade for, like, Moss or, yeah, really especially with Moss. I think that, like, those two were kind of meant to be together. And then Ouroboros is the deepest green, the green matte. And I stand by what I said in that Get Ready With Me when I used it. I do wish there was like a mid-tone. Like, I think if Oden'S had done something in this range with the rest of the colors, I think it would have made it even just a bit more exciting for me. I miss that like kind of true green. Because I think it would pair with Moss and Ouroboros really beautifully. And I think it would also pair with the yellows. But I can use Ouroboros as like a deepening shade. You could use it as like an all-over deep green eye situation. So I'm happy with this palette. But I wanted to be real clear. Like, I think the day I'm putting this up is the last restock of the palette. So if this color story grabs out to you, I don't think you would be disappointed. But I wanted to be clear about like how I feel. I'm so happy to have it. I'm going to continue to play with it because I don't feel like I've given it the full run of like my feelings on it. But I also wanted to make a note. If you picked up these palettes when they were released, let's say the restock is about to happen and you're like, I really want this, but financially it's not quite there for me. you might be surprised at how much of this palette you can kind of dupe the vibes from these palettes. There is not like one duplicate palette between these three and this one, but if you went for it and you picked up all three of these, you have some close tones. And I'm not saying that, like, I'm happy to have all four. I'm so happy to have all four. This is me saying, if you see that there's the last restock and you're stressing and you're like, I don't really have the money, but I want it, you might have more than you think already. The shimmers, I'm not going to say are duped exactly, but a lot of the matte tones, there are similarities. I do like this palette, love this palette, maybe even, but you know, real talk, it's limited edition. If you don't get it, life will go on. It is truly okay. I'm enjoying it. I think that this brand does some of the best full palette experiences that I've ever had. But again, life goes on without the makeup, if that's the situation that you are in. If you want it and you're gonna buy it, fuck yeah. If you already have it and you love it, fuck yeah. But, you know, just a lot of thoughts from me. I'm gonna wrap it up here because I actually want to go hang out with some friends and tease Patreon live stream and watch RuPaul's Drag Race, and I'm already running a little later than I wanted to be. Look at me having social life. What? Who am I? But anyway, if you have any questions about any of the palettes that I talked about, any of the specifics that I mentioned that I didn't clarify, definitely leave them in the comments. I will be around answering questions and happy to help, happy to talk you in or out of any of the things. I will link everything that I can in the description box. I do have affiliate code with Meera Beauty if you feel so inspired to pick up something from the brand. And otherwise, affiliate links will be noted if they're there. And thank you so much for spending a bit of your day with me. Let me know any of your thoughts on any of the palettes that I talked about today. And don't forget to take care of yourself better today than you did yesterday, because you are worth it. Bye, friends.